Ladies and gentlemen, it is not the wind that moves the Indian national flag. It moves with the last breath of Indian soldiers, sailors and airmen that die defending it. We live by chance, we love by choice, and we kill only when we have to in defense of India's integrity. He who has command of the seas has command over everything. He who rules the waves rules the world. Wars are not won or lost in the mind before they are won or lost on the ground. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Major General Ian Cardozo of the 5th Gurkha Rifles Frontier Force. I have taken part in all the wars that we have fought since independence. It is just 48 years ago and 3 days since India's great victory over Pakistan, where we liberated East Pakistan, gave birth to a new nation, Bangladesh, captured 93,000 Pakistani soldiers, and achieved total mastery over the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, so much so that no foreign ship could approach Karachi harbour without permission of the Government of India out at New Delhi, and this too without a naval blockade. This great victory over land, sea and air flowed from 5 important factors. First, total cooperation between the politician, the bureaucrat and the armed forces. Secondly, jointsmanship and understanding between the Army, Navy and Air Force. Third, acceptance of armed force strategy and the non-interference in the conduct of the operations by the government. Good intelligence and hard training. Excellent leadership, both political and military. And last but not the least and most important, high morale. The armed forces have been taught not to blow your own trumpet and beat your own drum, particularly the Navy, which is known as the silent service. This reticence has resulted in the man in the street not coming to know what the armed forces do to keep him safe. This needs to change because it is about time that the Indian citizen knows more about the armed forces because they too have a stake in the security of India. The Indian Navy did a great job in ensuring India's total victory over Pakistan. This is not so well known, and it is time that their story is told. I have told this story in great detail in my book, The Sinking of INS Khukri, but everyone has not read this book. Today, I will tell you briefly about what really happened in that war. The way the Indian Navy fought that war can be told in the following 3 stories. The first story is the hunt for the Vikrant. The second story is Mission Karachi. And the third story is the sinking of INS Khukri. During the 1965 Indo-Pak War, Indonesia was collaborating with Pakistan, whereas Pakistan was aiming to take J&K by force. Indonesia was aiming to capture some of the Nicobar Islands, as that would give her access to control over that part of the Indian Ocean. The greater part of the Indian Navy's resources were committed in the Bay of Bengal to the detriment of a control over the Arabian Sea. Because of this, the Indian Navy was prohibited from launching offensive operations on the west coast against Pakistan and were restricted to the latitude passing through Porbandar in Gujarat. The Pakistan Navy, meanwhile, bombarded the port of Dwarka, and though it could do no damage, it claimed that it was a great naval victory. The Indian Navy, because of these restrictions, could not engage the Pakistan Navy. They not only found this extremely irritating, but also considered this to be an insult to their professional competence and capacity. The Naval Chief, Admiral Soman, had to accept the orders conveyed to him by the Raksha Mantri and the Prime Minister. Admiral Nanda, later on, as Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Western Naval Command, said that I have been born and brought up in Karachi. I know the harbour like the back of my hand. And given the chance, in the next war, I will set Karachi on fire. As I said, this is going to be told in 3 stories, and story 1 is the hunt for the Vikrant. India's aircraft carrier INS Vikrant was the pride of the Indian Navy. Just before the war, it developed a crack on its boiler. This restricted its speed, which in turn had 2 effects. It would be difficult to launch fighter aircraft from its decks, as minimum surface speed is essential to launch an aircraft. B, it would become vulnerable to attack from enemy submarines. Taking this into account, it was decided to send her to the east, where she would be out of harm's way from Pakistan's submarines. Pakistan's 3 Daphne-class submarines were, at that time, the best submarines in the world. At that time, India was aware that Pakistan was making plans to attack India, but the date and time was not known. General J.F.R. Jacob, a shrewd strategist at Headquarters Eastern Command, decided to find out for himself. He set up wireless intercepting stations to eavesdrop on all communication between Karachi and Dhaka. Not only was he able to do this, but these stations also broke the Pakistan's naval secret code. Therefore, we came to know exactly what Pakistan Navy was up to in the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. These plans revealed A, that Pakistan's Daphne-class submarines and her midget submarines were tasked to destroy warships of the Indian Navy in the ports and harbours and at sea. B, PNS Ghazi, which was an American submarine gifted to Pakistan by the USA, was tasked to destroy the Vikrant. C, that Pakistan was likely to start the war soon, possibly in the early part of December. When Admiral Nanda learnt of this, he went personally to Bombay on the 1st of December, addressed all officers and men, and ordered the Navy out of Bombay harbour and out of harm's way. Unknown to him and the Indian Navy, one of the Daphne-class submarines, PNS Hangor, was lying in wait outside Bombay harbour and also waiting for the war to start. Thanks to the instinct and intuition of Admiral Nanda, the Western Fleet was moved out of Bombay harbour before the war commenced. The fleet passed over the waiting Pakistani submarine PNS Hangor. The second command of the submarine urged the captain, Commander Taslim Ahmed, to torpedo the ships of the Western Fleet, but better sense prevailed and the submarine did not take action because the war had not yet started. Pakistan had 3 Daphne-class submarines, the Hangor, the Mangro and the Sushuk, all 3 named after species of sharks found in Pakistani waters, and they were truly deadly. The best submarines in the world at that time. The Hangor and the Mangro were outside Bombay harbour at that time. Meanwhile, the Pakistan Navy, through its intelligence agencies and spies, learnt that the Vikrant was in Chennai. The captain of the Ghazi was ordered to leave Karachi within 48 hours and tasked to destroy the Vikrant. The Ghazi left Karachi in the 3rd week of November, probably on 21st November, refueled at Trincomalee, probably on the 23rd of November, and at this stage received news that the Vikrant was no longer in Chennai. The captain of the Ghazi was extremely disappointed because now he did not know where the Vikrant had gone. However, if India was intercepting Pakistani communications, Pakistan was also monitoring Indian messages. Through their intercepts, she learned that the Vikrant was in Visakhapatnam harbour. The captain of the Ghazi had the following choices. A. To destroy the Vikrant by laying mines over the channel of Visakhapatnam harbour, hoping that the Vikrant would pass over these mines and get destroyed. However, there was no guarantee that this would happen. The second option was to destroy the Vikrant as it emerged from Visakhapatnam harbour. This too had its own risks because the Vikrant would be escorted by destroyers, frigates, and anti-submarine vessels. The third option was the best option, and that was to destroy the Vikrant in the harbour itself. However, the Ghazi had been submerged for many days, and hydrogen leaking from the old acid batteries were causing problems for the crew who were finding it difficult to breathe. The Ghazi, however, could also not surface due to activity of Indian naval ships in the harbour. The captain of the Ghazi decided she would surface on the night of 3rd, 4th December and then escape after destroying the Vikrant. Meanwhile, Pakistan attacked India at 5:45 p.m. on 3rd December. The Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was on her way to Delhi after a visit to Calcutta. She was diverted to Lucknow as her aircraft could be an excellent target for Pakistani fighters. She returned to Delhi around 10 p.m., was briefed by the army chief in the operations room, and then moved to address the nation around midnight, when there was a tremendous explosion in Visakhapatnam harbour, shattering all the glass panes of buildings on the harbour. The next day, it was discovered that the Ghazi had self-destructed in Visakhapatnam harbour. The possible causes were A. It had got destroyed on one of its own mines that it was laying. However, that was not the case because the keel of the Ghazi was intact and it was ripped open from the conning tower to the front part of the submarine. B. Explosion of one of its torpedoes while it was maneuvering to destroy the Vikrant. This too was unlikely as there are too many safeguards in operating torpedoes. C. Explosion of very volatile hydrogen gas caused by the leakage of the batteries of the Ghazi that were old. Most naval sources indicate that this was the most likely cause. The twist in this story, however, is that the Vikrant was never in Visakhapatnam harbour. Aware of the Ghazi's plans, the Indian Navy had placed an old destroyer, the INS Rajput, as a decoy for the Vikrant in Visakhapatnam harbour. Messages in low-level cipher allowed the Ghazi to believe that the Vikrant was in Visakhapatnam harbour, whereas in actual fact it was somewhere else. The second story relates to Mission Karachi, which was the attack of the Pakistan Navy in the area of Karachi harbour. You would recollect what I had said earlier, that Admiral Nanda, while recalling that the Indian Navy had not been allowed to take part offensively during the 1965 war, had said that should there be a war in the future, he would set Karachi on fire. During the 1971 war, he was made the naval chief and he made this happen. Some of you would also recall that before the war, America, China and Pakistan had become allies. Both America and China had committed that they would come to the aid of Pakistan if it was attacked by India. Secure in this belief, Pakistan attacked India on the 3rd of December 1971. India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had, however, signed a friendship agreement with Russia. As part of this agreement, India received a consignment of missile boats from Russia. These had been designed by the Russians for the defense of ports and harbours. The young naval officers who manned these missile boats, however, put their thinking caps on and examined how these superb weapon platforms could be used in the offensive role to attack Karachi. There were problems, however. Firstly, these missile boats did not have the range to travel all the way to Karachi. It was decided, therefore, that they would be towed to the vicinity of Karachi by other naval craft and let loose on Karachi when they came close. The second issue was that these boats could not be used on the high seas, and that meant they could not be used in rough weather. The crews of these boats decided to take that risk. Admiral Nanda backed the idea and approved their plans. The first operation that was used was Operation Trident. The attack on Karachi commenced on 4th December, the day after Pakistan attacked India. The Indian naval offensive was codenamed Operation Trident. At that time, Pakistan had warned all mercantile shipping to keep away from Karachi waters. This conveyed to the Indian Navy that any vessel in the vicinity of Karachi would be an enemy naval craft and open to destruction. The missile boats, released from the boats that were towing them, proceeded to Karachi. The first Pakistani naval ship to be destroyed was the destroyer PNS Khyber. The next Pakistani warship to be destroyed was the Pakistani minesweeper PNS Muhafiz. Along with these two Pakistani warships, two cargo ships carrying ammunition, the Venus Challenger literally exploded with all her ammunition on board. The Shah Jahan was also hit, but perhaps did not sink. One missile was launched at the Kiamari oil refinery, which caught fire and burned for 2 days and 2 nights. The Indian Air Force pilots who saw the exploding ammunition ships and the Kiamari oil fields burning said this was the biggest bonfire in Asia which they had witnessed. The fleet commander, Admiral Kuruvilla, launched Operation Python on 6 December 1971, but the sea was too rough to permit the missile boats to operate. The operation recommenced on the 8th of December. However, by 7 December, the Pakistani Navy had decided that they had enough and withdrew into Karachi harbour, that is, they refused to fight. The missile boats destroyed a Pakistani warship, name not known, which was relaying information about the missile boats. Next was a British vessel, Harmattan, which was set on fire, and a Panamanian vessel, Gulf Star, which was destroyed and sank. A Pakistani Navy oil tanker, PNS Dhaka, was also hit but did not sink. 2 more missiles were fired at the Kiamari oil refinery, which was set ablaze, and as predicted by Admiral Nanda, Karachi was set on fire and burnt for 7 days and 7 nights. Rough seas did not permit the use of the missile boats any further, and the Western Fleet made its way back to Bombay. However, the attack on Karachi was being monitored by the Russians. Admiral Gorshkov, a very senior naval officer of Russia, danced with joy when he saw our missile boats being employed by the Indian Navy in the offensive role. He openly admitted that the Indian naval officers had used Russian missile boats in a role that the Russians had never dreamt was possible. Soon after the war, he asked to meet the missile boat commanders so that he could give each of them the traditional Russian bear hug. Meanwhile, the Pakistani Navy had bolted into Karachi harbour and refused to fight. they did not know what had hit them. No merchant ship was permitted to come close to Karachi harbour without the permission of the Indian government in Delhi. This too without a naval blockade or even the presence of an Indian Navy vessel outside of Karachi. Meanwhile, the eastern arm of the Indian Navy had destroyed Pakistani naval ships by air attacks from the Vikrant. Chittagong and Khulna harbours and the boats within them were destroyed by frogmen and air attacks. Pakistani diplomats trying to flee were interdicted and captured. Meanwhile, Richard Nixon ordered the US 7th Fleet to enter the Bay of Bengal and come to the aid of the Pakistanis. But it was too late. East Pakistan had been liberated and a new country, Bangladesh, was born. The sinking of INS Khukri. The Khukri, the Kirpan and the Kuthar were three obsolete frigates tasked with giving protection to the Western Fleet. They were equipped with sonars that had a range of just 2,500 meters, that is 2.5 kilometers, whereas Pakistan's Daphne submarines had a range of 25,000 meters, that is 25 kilometers, that is 10 times more range than the frigates. During the raid on Karachi, the Kuthar's engines got disabled and it had to be towed back to Bombay. After leaving the Kuthar in Bombay, the Khukri and the Kirpan were detailed to go back to provide protection to the fleet. There were two reasons for this. A Pakistani submarine had been identified in the area around Dio, and this posed a threat to the missile boats assembled there for Operation Python. This threat could not be ignored, and the Pakistani submarine needed to be destroyed. Captain Mahendranath Mulla, in charge of the depleted squadron with only now the Khukri and the Kirpan, did not throw up his hands and say, "How can I fight these submarines who can detect my presence 25 miles away, whereas I can know of their presence only when he is 2.5 kilometers away from me." Meanwhile, Western Naval Headquarters posted a young naval officer on board the Khukri to improve the range of the sonar. The consequence of this experiment and the tactics of zigzagging to avoid enemy submarines resulted in the slowing down of the Khukri from 50 knots to 12 knots, which made it very vulnerable. There were, however, other resources available to support anti-submarine operations of the Khukri and the Kirpan. These were Sea King helicopters with their dunking sonars, which were top-of-the-art anti-submarine weapons. B. Anti-submarine Ablaze aircraft based at Bombay. C. Superconi maritime reconnaissance aircraft. Inexplicably, the Sea King helicopters returned to Bombay at 6:30 p.m. on the night of 9th December, and the other resources which probably could not be used were not available. The Khukri and the Kirpan were now alone. The Hangar, which was a submarine lurking in these waters, saw its chance. It came closer to the two frigates and fired its first torpedo at the Kirpan. This torpedo went below the keel of the Kirpan, and the Kirpan now realized the danger and moved out of the vicinity. The Hangar now fired its second torpedo that caught the Khukri amidship, and it exploded and sank within a couple of minutes. The Captain Mulla decided to go down with the ship, although he could have saved himself. His self-sacrifice was probably in sync with the conduct of Indian officers that stated, "How can I save myself first when most of my men cannot save themselves?" There are lessons to be learned from all the three stories. In the first story, The Hunt for the Vikrant, the first lesson that we can learn is the use of intelligence. Wireless interception stations helped us to know what Pakistan was up to and helped to shape our strategy and our tactics. The second lesson is security and deception. Using the INS Rajput as a decoy to fool the Ghazi that the Vikrant was in Visakhapatnam when in fact it was somewhere else. The second story, Mission Karachi. The innovative use of weapons, that is using the missile boats in the offensive role, when in fact it was designed by the Russians for defense of ports. The second lesson of the second story is the ability to take risks in decision making. The Indian Navy took the risk of using the missile boats, knowing full well that they could not operate in rough seas. And this risk paid off because the boats delivered. The third story is sinking of the Khukri. From this story, the Indian government needs to understand that we need to have the best weapons to defeat the enemy. The loss of the Khukri was due to using obsolete warships with substandard sonars, which made the Khukri and the Kirpan extremely vulnerable to state-of-the-art submarines. In war, there are no runners-up. You either win or you lose. Victory is paramount in the armed forces, and for the country to succeed, the Army, Navy and Air Force must have the best. Although the sinking of the Khukri was a blow to morale, the Indian armed forces are also taught that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. You may lose a battle, but you have to win the war. And if morale is affected, we need to understand what Field Marshal Slim said. Morale is 10 times more important than anything else. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Jai Hind.
Thank you.